Hello, and welcome to the sixth episode of the Christian History mini lecture series. Today we are going to study a period of history spanning from 570 to 732 AD. That is roughly from the birth of Muhammad all the way up until the Battle of Tours. We have a couple objectives for today. Firstly, you'll be able to explain the early history, basic tenets, and appeal of Islam. And secondly, you will be able to explain the historical significance of the Battle of Tours. Now, our story for today begins with the birth of a certain boy in the Arabian Peninsula who grows up as an orphan raised by his uncle. His name is Muhammad. Muhammad's parents tragically passed away, so he was raised by his uncle Abu Talib. It is difficult to be an orphan in any era, but it was very, very, very difficult in the Arabian desert 1,400 plus years ago. Now, the hardship that Muhammad experienced as an orphan has undoubtedly shaped the character of Islam. It has most certainly impacted Muhammad's own posture towards orphans, and you can see this if you've read the Quran. Now, Muhammad was raised in a very interesting place in an interesting time. We discussed in a previous lecture how the Western Roman Empire had fallen and shattered into a number of different kingdoms. We had the Visigothic kingdom in Spain, the kingdom of the Franks that was established by Clovis, and finally, we also had the kingdom of the Lombards in northern Italy. Now, the Eastern Roman Empire continued to exist. The Byzantine Empire was still the most powerful force in the Mediterranean, controlling much of Asia Minor and Turkey and also northern Africa. However, the Byzantine Empire was also greatly weakened, not just by plague, but also by political conflict, a lot of political intrigue, power changes hands a number of times, a lot of people get assassinated. Byzantine history is messy. And that's going to have ramifications for some of the history we're going to learn today, but we'll get back to that. Now, Muhammad was raised in Arabia. Arabia was interesting because there were a number of different cultures and religions all present there. Muhammad would have interacted with Jewish communities. He also would have interacted with Christians. Now, a number of Christians in the Arabian desert were not what we will refer to as Orthodox Christians, meaning that we had a lot of people who did not affirm the Council of Chalcedon's decision. They would not have believed that Christ was fully God, fully man, who had two natures that were perfectly united in one person. You would have had a lot of monophysites, a lot of Nestorians, and people that we would not believe represent what we will refer to as Orthodox Christianity. So if you read the Quran and are kind of confused by Muhammad's characterization of Christianity, if you talk to an Islamic imam and are confused by the way that they frame Christianity, that is because what strands of Christianity Muhammad interacted with when he grew up are not representative of any of the major streams of the Christian tradition. Now, Muhammad was raised in Mecca, and Mecca was important because it was the center of trade in the Arabian Peninsula. The Arabian Desert is not a good place to be if you want to make a living growing crops. However, it is a great place to be if you want to make a fortune as a caravan trader. A number of caravans went through Arabian desert, which connected various regions of the world. And therefore, Mecca being a hub for trade, kind of a central place, a central meeting place for traders and caravans, it made its fortune doing just that. There was also quite a bit of oppression, right? Quite a significant income disparity between the wealthy. We had a number of orphans and widows who were mistreated. Muhammad would have witnessed this. Muhammad decided to make his small fortune as a caravan trader, and he marries a woman named Khadijah, who is both a merchant and a widow. According to Muhammad's biographers, he and Khadijah have a very wonderful relationship. They're very deeply in love. And Khadijah, this widow, clearly also has an impact on the shape and character of Islam. Look at the way that the Quran speaks about widows and our obligation to care for widows, and you'll see Khadijah's influence there. Now, when Muhammad was 40 years old, he claimed to see visions in Mecca. Mecca was not only the hub for trade, it was also a religious center. If you had gone to Mecca, you would have seen at this time period a number of polytheistic peoples that would have gathered there. There was an important religious artifact called the Kaaba, which housed what a lot of people believe to be a meteorite. And there would have been a number of idols in the Kaaba, and people would enter into the Kaaba. They would go there to worship together. Now, Muhammad, who grows up in this predominantly polytheistic society, claims to see visions given to him by the one true God. Muhammad, who is seeking after God, one day is approached by God through an angel, the angel Gabriel, and Gabriel squeezes Muhammad so much that it hurts him. And Muhammad does not know what to do. Gabriel tells him, recite the words of God. And Muhammad does not know what to recite, how to recite. According to Islamic tradition, Muhammad was illiterate. But Gabriel continues to squeeze Muhammad, telling him to submit to the will of Allah. And Muhammad, in his heart and with his soul and with everything that he's got, submits. And he is given the ability to read and to recite the oracles of God. Now, in these visions, Muhammad is instructed to tell the people that there is only one God, Allah, and any religion that espouses belief in multiple gods, they are false religions. There is one God, Allah, and all people are to submit to him. Submission is a huge, huge deal to Muslims. As a matter of fact, the word Muslim is derived from the word which means submit. In Muhammad's earlier oracles especially, there is the command to care for the orphan, to care for the widow, and to give to the poor. Perhaps unsurprisingly, Muhammad's message is really popular among a number of the inhabitants of Mecca. He gains a number of followers who are really excited about these new oracles from the one true God. However, Muhammad also starts to gain a list of enemies. He offends the clan leaders by threatening their power and religion. Muhammad is criticizing them and their lifestyles. He is also arguing that their religious practices are illegitimate. This makes the people very, very, very angry. And there is actually an assassination attempt against Muhammad. So Muhammad, deciding that it is no longer safe for him and his followers to live in Mecca, flees to Medina. Now, Medina is not close to Mecca. They're quite far apart. And this travel through the desert is difficult. It's harrowing. And it's a very important moment in the history of Islam. I'm going to read an excerpt from Surah 96, one of the first surahs. Recite in the name of your Lord who created man from clots of blood. Recite, your Lord is the most bountiful one, who by the pen taught man what he did not know. Indeed, man transgresses in thinking himself his own master, for to your Lord all things return. Notice, right, that this character of Allah, he's speaking to Muhammad and telling him, recite, I am the supreme omnipotent God. Humanity compared to Allah is nothing. God created you from clots of blood. Muslims do not believe that humanity is made in God's image. They would consider that to be sacrilegious to say. They believe that the distinction between creator and creature is infinite, that they don't have that kind of relationship. Notice also this emphasis on submission, right? Submission, reciting, submitting to this great God. Now, while Muhammad flees to Medina, his troubles follow him there. Muhammad has to face the death of his beloved wife, Khadijah. Her death is most likely a very traumatic experience for him. He does remarry, and Muhammad marries a girl named Aisha. He is betrothed to her when she is only 6 years old. That is startlingly young. Now, Muhammad's biographers were very, adamant that he did not consummate his relationship with her until she was 9. But even that is very, very, very young, even for ancient standards. That's worth noting. Now, Muhammad together with his Muslim followers, raid caravans that come to and from Mecca in order to gather supplies in order to survive. And tensions between Muhammad and between the leaders of Mecca continue to grow. There are a number of battles between them. Now, there's also a growing displeasure with Jews and Christians who would not convert to Islam. A very interesting thing about the Quran and about Islam is that Muhammad claimed that his God was the same God who appeared to the Jews and to the Christians, and therefore the Hebrew Bible and the Christian New Testament, these were revelations that were given to humans from the same God, from Allah. However, Jews and Christians had over time corrupted these writings to the point where the Bible is no longer a reliable source, not at least in the way that the Quran is a reliable source of God's revealed message to humanity. At the beginning, and if you read Muhammad's earlier surahs, he will tell the Jews and Christians, welcome, come, right? You people of the book, come and join me in my religion. This is the same God whom you have worshipped. He has given us another revelation. This is the true religion. Join us now. And unsurprisingly, a lot of Jews and Christians are unwilling to convert. They're unwilling to help Muhammad, and he gets very bitter, embittered by this. And you'll see that Muhammad's later surahs, especially those written in Medina, and also after Muhammad returns to Mecca, they tend to have a much more negative view of Jews and Christians. Now, Muhammad fought Meccan forces in multiple battles. One of the most popular or famous is the Battle of the Trench, in which the Meccan army approaches Medina. Muhammad is hopelessly outnumbered. Now, Muhammad reached out to the Jews within Medina and asked that they help him fight against the Meccans. However, these Jews don't want to jump into a bloodbath for the sake of a religion that they don't even believe in. So hard pass, they decide not to help Muhammad. So Muhammad leads his Muslims outside. They dig a huge defensive trench, and Muhammad, through some ingenuity, and according to Muslims, through the help of Allah, defeats the much larger Meccan army. Now, Muhammad returns to Medina furious with the Jews, and he orders that they be executed if they do not convert. So according to Muhammad's biographers, Muhammad beheaded 600 to 900 Jews who would not convert, and he threw their bodies into the ditch. So this is an important moment in the history of Islam as well, because we see here that what began as a religion that really emphasizes care for orphans and widows, that really touts itself as a religion of peace, becomes a religion that persecutes to the death those who will not convert to Islam. You'll also note that the oracles that Muhammad apparently receives in Medina, they often contain commands from Allah to the Muslims to fight. You know, he'll tell them self-defense and even retaliation. These are not only rights, they are obligations. You must fight back, because this is the way in which Allah will defend his people, and these are the way in which Allah will establish his justice on earth. Muhammad, after defeating the Meccan army, gathers his troops, marches them towards Mecca, captures it very easily, and all the people in Mecca, very quickly and hurriedly convert to Islam. At least most of them do. And Muhammad controls Mecca, the city full of people who had once rejected him. Now, there's an obvious appeal to Islam, and I want to speak about it very quickly. You'll remember, if you've read the New Testament, that a lot of the Jews were not pleased with Christ because of the fact that Christ was not the conquering hero that they thought the Messiah would be. He wasn't going to lead them against the Romans in armed combat. He wasn't going to defeat and put to the sword all of the enemies of Israel. This was a disappointment to them. Muhammad, in many ways, is what those Jews would have wanted in a Messiah, right? Muhammad is willing to take up arms for the sake of his people. He will encourage his people to fight against their oppressors, to enact justice with their own hands, and to exact vengeance for the sake of justice and for the sake of their own well-being. Look at Surah 9. Prophet, make war on the unbelievers and the hypocrites and deal rigorously with them. Hell shall be their home, an evil fate. Now, I want to speak a little bit about some of the major tenets of Islam. If you could boil down the major beliefs of Islam, or kind of the major actions and obligations of a Muslim, they are these. Muslims are obligated first and foremost to declare belief in one true God. Muslims do not believe in the Trinity. As a matter of fact, they would consider Christianity to actually be a polytheistic religion. And as a matter of fact, I once spoke to an imam who told me that he believes that Christians are essentially polytheists. He believes that it's irrational to assert that the Father, Son, Holy Spirit are all one God. That makes no sense to a Muslim. Muslims must fast during the season of Ramadan. Muslims must give alms to the poor. Muslims must pray and kneel 5 times towards Mecca, engaging in corporate prayer. And finally, Hajj, right? Muslims must, if they can, if they have the means, go to Mecca and visit the Kaaba at least once in their life. This is an important pilgrimage, and you'll see that Mecca to this day is a hub for Muslims to go and to fulfill this obligation. Now, Muhammad, after taking back Mecca, leads the Muslims on conquest. They go and start taking some of their neighboring territories. I want us to look back at this map of Europe at 600 AD, when Muhammad was a young man. You'll see that the Byzantine Empire controls most of the Mediterranean, including North Africa, including much of the Middle East. This is a map of the Middle East during the reign of Muhammad, and also in the generations following him. Muhammad leads his troops against a number of towns and villages. He conquers them. After Muhammad dies, there is a huge conflict and controversy over who should succeed him. Should it be Ali, his son-in-law, or should it be Abu Bakr, his father-in-law? Now, those who believe that Abu Bakr was the correct successor are what we'll refer to as Sunni Muslims. And Shia Islam, on the other hand, refers to those Muslims who believe that Ali should have been the one to succeed Muhammad. But Sunni Islam takes control during this time period. They go out and they begin taking territory that once belonged to the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantine Empire has been greatly weakened due to a number of factors, including political conflict. So all of a sudden, the Byzantines are shocked when these forces, these armies from Arabia come in and start defeating them, taking their villages and settlements. Some of the people within the Byzantine Empire actually wondered if this was the judgment of God against them for some of their sins of their own leaders, which is interesting, but we don't have time to talk about that. The Muslims also take much of North Africa, and they don't stop there. They march into the Visigothic kingdom and they capture it. The Visigothic kingdom falls. Spain is under Muslim control. And they don't stop there either. They have ambitions. The Umayyad Caliphate has ambitions to go and to really capture Europe. There was, according to medieval historians, one man who stood up against the wave of Islamic conquest. His name was Charles Martel, a nobleman within the Frankish kingdom. Charles Martel was a mayor of the palace who has himself declared Duke and Prince of the Franks. So he leads the Frankish kingdom, which was established by Clovis, and he stops the Islamic invasion of Europe at the Battle of Tours. He helps defeat a much, much larger army, keeps them from invading Europe, and pushes them back. Now, historians through the centuries have argued that the Battle of Tours was a world-altering event. Had it not been for Charles Martel's defeat of the Umayyad Caliphate, maybe Islam would have continued to burn through Europe. After all, there was no one else that could have really pushed against them. And if that was the case, the history of Europe would have been very, very, very different if Christianity had fallen there and Islam had succeeded. Charles Martel is also the grandfather of someone very famous. He's the grandfather of Charlemagne. And we'll talk a little bit more about Charlemagne in the next video lecture and how he helps establish a Christian empire and revives learning within Europe and helps establish Christian culture, unlike almost any other person during that time period. Here's another map of the Battle of Tours in 732 AD. You will see here that the Umayyad Caliphate was marching right into the heart of Europe before they were stopped at the Battle of Tours. In the next video lecture, we will learn how Charlemagne will rise up and, like Charles Martel, keep the Islamic forces to the south at bay while also defending Christian civilization from a number of forces and threats to the north, the Saxons, the Vikings. And we'll talk about that later. Thank you so much for sticking with me over the course of this video. I'm excited for you guys to continue to explore Christian history with me in the following episodes. Thank you.